Did you know Iran was once a secular country? It was not always this blood-baying and hostile state. Iran was a tolerant, libertarian, and a decent country. This was in the early 20th century when the imperial state of Iran was still in place and had not been replaced by a mullah regime. The Islamists we today see brutalizing Iran came to power only in 1979 after the Islamic Revolution. Even among the Islamists, the early years of the Islamic regime were much better than they are today. Let's just say the Khomeinis were the lesser evils. But the secular Iran I am talking about was back when Reza Shah was crowned Shah in 1925. He made any public display or expression of religious faith, including the wearing of the headscarf by women and wearing of facial hair by men, illegal. Public religious festivals and celebrations were banned. Islamic clergy were forbidden to preach in public, and mosque activities were heavily restricted and regulated. Life for the Islamists was hell in Iran in the early 1900s. Reza Shah intended to secularize Iran and eliminate the influence of the Shia clergy upon the government and society. Until the 1970s, the Shahs had been incredibly successful at limiting the role of the clergy in the governance of Iran. The country was democratic. Today, some of the secularist forces are gaining traction. Plus, they are being supported by top leaders of the West, and the Islamist regime is getting rattled. Hi and welcome. This is TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I am your host Sanbir Nanhotra, and in this video I will tell you how the West is looking to support secularist and pro-democracy forces in Iran to topple the current radical regime in Tehran. Let's begin. Iran is fast turning into a country where the very semblance of freedom is evaporating. After the election of Ibrahim Raisi as president, Iran's fortunes have taken a turn for the worse. The only significant opposition to the Iranian government and radical Islamist regime is now no longer within Iranian territories. Instead, it is based out of foreign countries like France and Albania. The National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI for short, is the only hope which the Shi'ite nation has to be free from the Islamic clergy and regime one day. And this opposition group is beginning to garner the support of some of the biggest leaders of the West. Within Iran, the NCRI is deemed a terrorist organization. This was the case with the European Union and the United States as well, who had labeled the NCRI as a terror organization up until 2009 and 2012 respectively. Now, the NCRI is being supported, applauded, and appreciated by some of the biggest names in the West, solely due to the fact that it is the only organization of Iranians that can truly challenge the Islamist regime in Tehran. The NCRI is the political wing of the Mujahideen-e-Khalq. On Saturday, the NCRI organized protests in Berlin and elsewhere seeking the prosecution of the Islamic Republic's newly elected president, Ibrahim Raisi, who is accused of crimes against humanity. These international protests coincided with general strikes in Iran, led by contract workers in the oil and petrochemical industries, which were also joined by workers from more than 100 state-owned companies. Founded in 1981, the NCRI's primary objective is to replace the Islamic regime in control of the affairs in Iran. The coalition is made up of different Iranian dissident groups, with its main member being the People's Mujahideen of Iran. The NCRI also aims to establish a pluralistic political system with free assembly, freedom of expression, and respect for individual freedoms in Iran. It seeks a separation of mosque and state and also advocates for prohibitions against religious discrimination. Interestingly, it supports an outright rejection of nuclear development and possession of weapons of mass destruction. For its democratic ethos and its fight against the Islamic regime in Tehran, the NCRI is garnering global support at an unprecedented pace, which is rattling the clergy and extremists in power in Tehran. On Saturday, the NCRI organized a massive rally in front of Berlin's iconic Brandenburg Gate. For this event, the NCRI was able to get many famous and influential speakers, some of which included former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Democratic strategist Donna Brazile, and numerous serving US senators from across the aisle. They all commended the NCRI for its efforts at fighting the Iranian regime, which has lost its mind. Applauding the NCRI, Pompeo said, "May your mission be blessed and protected. May the Iranian people be blessed." Pompeo's support for the group was echoed by Donna Brazil, who praised the remarkable courage and leadership of the NCRI's president, Maryam Rajavi. Also speaking during the event were Democratic Senators Bob Menendez and Cory Booker, and Republican Senators Roy Blunt and Ted Cruz, the former UK House of Commons Speaker John Bercow, former Italian Foreign Minister Franco Frattini, former Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and others. The NCRI is not all that is worrying Tehran right now. In fact, exiled Prince Reza Pahlavi, who is the son of the last Shah of Iran, is also mounting an aggressive campaign against the Islamists in power in his country. Reza Pahlavi, the heir to Iran's last Shah, has declared civil disobedience against the Islamic Republic. He advocates for the abolition of the clerical state and a popular referendum on Iran's future political structure. In a statement released on Saturday, Pahlavi called on Iranians to aspire to be citizens, not Khomeini's slaves and vassals, and praised the continued strikes and rallies as proof of unprecedented national cooperation in civil disobedience. Meanwhile, the former supreme leader, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's family, is rising in revolt as well. Hassan Khomeini, grandson of Ayatollah Ruhollah, called out the Iranian Guardian Council's brazen engineering of the polls, saying the new government which will be formed will not have the backing of the public and will thus be an illegitimate one. With the backing of the Western powers, the NCRI can work with other opposition leaders and forces and seek to replace the Islamist regime of Tehran with one which is secular and democracy-loving. Already, the European Union has announced renewed support for those most in need in Iran. This package amounts to 22 million euros in humanitarian aid. This is indeed a beginning, and Iranian opposition forces must be invested in by various world powers immediately so that the Islamist regime can be brought to its knees.